All right, hello. I hope everyone's having a great day at Sports Philanthropy World. My name is Howard Brown. I'm moderating this session on disabilities in sport. And I think what you're going to find at this session is very important and great work being done with people with disabilities of all types around the world and how they relate to sports. And we have really great panelists today. And I'll let them introduce themselves, but Eli Wolff, Joanna, who's in the actual UK, and Bryce Weiler, who's actually blind, but he's on Zoom here and we can see him, so we're excited. So I'd like to go around and start with introductions, and Joanna, will you lead us off, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Howard. And thanks to Sport Philanthropy World for this opportunity, and really excited to speak alongside Eli and Bryce today. I'm Joanna, I'm the Managing Director of the Centre for Access to Football in Europe, or CAFE. And we've set up in 2009, and we're a UEFA Football and Social Responsibility partner, supporting UEFA and their national associations to improve the match day experience for disabled spectators. So what does that actually mean in practice? We work on UEFA's club competition finals every year, and the European Championships, which come every 4 years. And we use those as a platform for greater change. So we'll go and assess the venue at least 1 year in advance, sometimes 3 years in advance if it's the European Championships. We take the match day journey of differently disabled people, and we assess the full match day experience and provide a report to UEFA, giving them recommendations for changes that need to be implemented ahead of the final, but also recommendations for the host club or national associations in terms of what they can do in the long term to benefit their local disabled fans. We also provide and create guidance. So our biggest piece of guidance at the moment is the Access for All Guide, which is based on European standards, but it follows international best practice as well. And again, it follows that full match day journey of a disabled fan from the point of finding information on a club or stadium to getting tickets, going through the venue, seating, VIP, media, emergency evacuation, etc. So that's available to download on our website amongst a lot of other guidance. And then we also support UEFA in creating regulations. So to give an example, in 2015, UEFA created a new club licensing criterion, which obliged clubs to appoint a disability access officer. And that person is responsible for advising the club and all of its departments, from communications to HR, on how to integrate accessibility and disability inclusion into all of their practices. So we provide guidance and training on that topic. And then our final major area of work is working with disabled supporters themselves. We support disabled fans in creating disabled supporter associations. And we see this as a real key part of our work. Without the feedback in collaboration with disabled fans, we wouldn't be able to advise UEFA and national associations accessibility. So we help disabled fans and establish groups which serve as an official platform for them to provide their feedback to their club and national association. So that's it in a nutshell and what we do.
Oh, Joanna, thank you. So we have some folks that have joined us now into the session as we get started. So when we come back around, I'll just have you just do a quick overview as well. It's very important what you did. Bryce, I'd like to turn to you and explain who you are and your organization.
Hi, Howard, and thanks everyone for having me on. My name is Bryce Weiler. I am the disability consultant for Baltimore's baseball team, helping make Camden Yards more accessible for Orioles fans of all disabilities and any other baseball fans who may come to Orioles games at Camden Yards. I've also worked to ensure that Baltimore Spring Training Stadium of Ed Smith Stadium in Sarasota, Florida is accessible for fans of all disabilities. On September 18th, 2018, I helped Baltimore become the first team in sports to wear Braille on their jerseys to honor people who are blind during one of their home games during the 2018 season. I have also given fans of all disabilities the opportunity to play on the field at Camden Yards with Baltimore's players and coaches before 2 home games last year. In addition, I am the co-founder of a nonprofit called the Beautiful Lives Project, where we work to help people of all disabilities to live their dreams in a wide range of programs throughout the country: sports, art, cheerleading, dance, ballet, music, a whole plethora of various programs throughout the country. On the sports side of things, we give individuals of all ages and all disabilities the opportunity to experience playing on the court or the field with teams in a range of sports, including soccer, football, baseball, basketball, various other sports. And we really think that is important, to give people of all disabilities the opportunity to be able to mingle together with people from other disabilities. So someone who's blind could be experiencing playing baseball or basketball with someone who's deaf or someone who's in a wheelchair. We also work to teach all of the host organizations how to make their programs accessible for various groups of people, making sure it's accessible for all disabilities. And we don't segment any Beautiful Lives Project programs to one group or another. They are open to all disabilities and to all ages, which is something that you don't find with many nonprofits or with many groups throughout the country. They typically have some type of a stipulation, whether it's just doing things for certain disabilities, whether it's autism or blindness or things like that. And how I became interested in doing these types of work was whenever I was in college. The former University of Evansville Aces head men's basketball coach, Marty Simmons, gave me the opportunity to sit on his men's basketball bench and experience college basketball, which was something that I was interested in being able to do. I've also commentated over 150 games on the radio as a blind sports radio broadcaster. So being able to have those opportunities, I wanted to give various opportunities to people of all disabilities to experience sports, to work to set standards for making stadiums more accessible, and for hiring people of all disabilities for jobs in sport or within other companies. The website for the Beautiful Lives Project is www.beautifullives.org, in case you'd like to check it out or to help us through funding. All of the money raised goes to set up more Beautiful Lives Project chapters throughout the country and to train chapter presidents. I'd love to speak with you more about that if you may have an interest in becoming a chapter president or hosting an event in possibly one of our 5 categories, or helping someone who has any disability to experience their dreams. So you can contact me from the website or email me at bryce@beautifullives.org, BRYCE @beautifullives.org. And that's a little bit about what I've done and about my life.
Wow, what a great introduction. So thank you both you, Joanna and Bryce. Eli, let's hear what you and your organization and your projects.
Sure thing. No, it's really wonderful to be here and to be together with Joanna and Bryce, and being able to have this conversation as part of the overall conference is really important. That disability can be a really essential part of the whole conversation about sport. And so for my work and my colleagues, actually Ted Fay and Mary Hums are joined on as well. So that's great. We have our team. And so I have, and Mary and Ted and the other colleagues, David Legg and Anita Mormon, we formed a team about 20 years ago to look at disability in sport and to really think about, from a systems approach, from looking at diversity and inclusion and all the work that's been done on race and gender and sexual orientation, to think about how disability fits into that. So for me, I competed as a collegiate athlete at Brown University. And then I also took part in two Paralympic Games as an Olympian. I was in the 96 and 04 games in the sport of soccer or football. So that's why Joanna and I have a lot to discuss and share about. And then our projects really took off under the mentorship and support of Richard Lapchick, who spoke yesterday. So Richard has really been a wonderful ally and supporter to ensure that disability is a part of those conversations of race and gender and many other forms of diversity. In college, I was really interested in the fact that I took a sport and society class, and that the book didn't have anything on disability at the time. There was no conversation when you're talking about social issues in sport and diversity and inclusion. There was nothing that was covered. And so that kind of sparked my interest, and that got Ted and Mary and David and Anita and I connected, one of the first kind of initial cases that was going on was the Casey Martin case, a professional golfer, and at the Supreme Court level. And so our team, we worked nationally to organize an amicus brief to the Supreme Court representing the disability community that helped to articulate that allowing Casey Martin to utilize a cart was not going to open up a Pandora's box and was an appropriate accommodation and was not anything to ruin the tradition of the sport. And so a number of initiatives, both nationally, internationally, we were fortunate to work on the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and have really been at the forefront and collaborative with organizations nationally, internationally to look at bringing disability forward. And how do we do it in a way that's really from a rights perspective, from an empowering perspective. And so, you know, we can talk more later about the nuances of that. But, you know, for me, kind of that passion, I was fortunate to grow up in a family. My grandfather was a clerk to the Supreme Court under Brown versus Board of Education with Justice Warren. And so that helped informed kind of my journey growing up around social justice and diversity. And so for me, as a person with a disability, then that lens of disability kind of helped to inform thinking about how does, and the kind of the work with Ted and Mary and others around systems. So like, you know, looking at professional sport, collegiate, Olympic, grassroots, the whole system, you know, fan experience, all these different dimensions of universal design. So that's kind of been a really big passion of ours, and using the framework of research, education, and advocacy. So we all have kind of academic positions, but then it's how do you bring that into the world to work proactively. So I'm happy to talk more about that.
Wow, just great openings. I really appreciate that. You know, in this digital world we live in, it can get noisy, and but I think it's really important now that you know, with diversity and inclusion, to include people with disabilities, either invisible or visible disabilities, which I think we all need to take into account. So, Joanna, I'd like to come back to you. Just give us a quick, brief overview if some of the people that joined might have missed it, but also let's take a deeper dive. First of all, I just learned about your organization, truly impressive about providing access and regulations in Europe. I hope there's a counterpart here in the US. If there's not, there needs to be, but please take us down a little deeper into your work and also some of the big successes and some of the challenges still ahead of you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'll dig a bit deeper into how we use some of the finals and the European competitions and what we've done with FIFA as well with the World Cups, because I think that's obviously really relevant to everyone here in the States with you having the 2026 World Cup. So from the Euro perspective under UEFA, in 2016, the Euros were held across France. And one of the projects we have around each of these competitions is appointing accessibility monitors. So we have differently disabled fans who will go to a match and give us a report at the end of the match. And if there are major issues, we can escalate these to UEFA to resolve ahead of the next match. And what came out of 2016 through lots of photos from disabled fans and comments was that sightlines was a major issue. So under UEFA regulations, stadiums have to meet minimum numbers in terms of wheelchair user spaces and easy access seats for people with limited mobility who need a companion. And UEFA was suddenly realized that actually we've been focusing so much on quantity that we've not put this the message of quality across as well. And so we had tons of photos of disabled fans who throughout the entire match only saw the backs of the spectators in front of them. And they paid to go to this match. They traveled across different countries to get to France, and all they saw was spectators in front of them. So from that experience and from that tournament, lessons were learned. And now UEFA has a clear commitment to adequate sightlines. So not only meeting the minimum numbers of seating, but also the minimum quality. So that was a key part of what we do, and the main thing from that was that disabled fans' feedback is so essential to everything we do, and it's how we learn, how we improve, and without that feedback, we can only grow so much. Another example from the Russia World Cup in 2018 is that we had our largest projects with FIFA around the Russia World Cup. One of the projects we had was creating an accessibility working group. So we identified a number of disability organizations that represent differently disabled people, and we came together to discuss local issues and how we can make this World Cup as successful as possible for disabled people in Russia. And then after the World Cup, after we managed to make a number of changes in stadiums and ticketing policies, etc., for the tournament, the National Football Association in Russia appointed one of the accessibility working group members as a national disability access officer. So then they had someone on a national level creating a national strategy on how to improve accessibility going forward in football. And from that, we trained up that national disability access officer and a number of other people to assess stadiums outside of the tournament. So they have now assessed all of the stadiums in the top 2 divisions and provided reports for each club's disability access officer and how they can make improvements year on year. So it provides a basis for a strategy and a timeline. And it's also meant that we've seen changes with the media getting behind disabled fans. So there's been some issues and cases of discrimination in Russia within football. And the media has actually, for the first time, come onto these cases and raise their voices in favor of disabled fans, which is something we didn't see before in Russia. And so I think the part of the story with Russia is that the World Cup gave an amazing opportunity to put accessibility and to accelerate change within that country, but it also required the regulations from both UEFA and the hosting national association to make sure that that legacy really was carried out and implemented in a meaningful and sustainable way. So what would be really great to discuss is what goes on in the US in terms of regulations and national strategies to improve accessibility, so that for 2026, when it comes round and all of the stadiums have to meet FIFA's regulations, how can we build upon that to make long-lasting change afterwards across the 3 hosting countries?
Thank you for sharing that. That's great progress. I'm sure there's more work to be done. We'll get back to you on that. Bryce, take us down in some of your greatest successes and some challenges that what your work or Beautiful Lives is facing now.
I mentioned helping Baltimore's baseball team become the first team in sports to wear Braille on their jerseys to honor people who are blind, as I've been their disability consultant with things at Camden Yards since 2016. But it's a lot harder to convince more teams to make their stadiums more accessible or to do specialized programs for fans of all disabilities, because with the leagues in this country, there aren't very high standards for what teams have to do for fans of all disabilities, nor does it really govern some things that teams have to have. For example, some teams have closed captioning for fans who are deaf. Some teams have staff members who know how to translate sign language, or who can do sign language. If a patron shows up who is deaf, some teams do not do that. So league-wide standards are something that I struggle with, and I struggle to convince the heads of these leagues, Rob Manfred, Adam Silver, and various other people, to set standards for what teams have to do. So when I contact a team and I discuss what I've done with Baltimore and what I'm working on doing in the future, a lot of teams really don't want to do that because they don't have to, and they don't really want to put that into their budget. Now, some teams do a great job of helping fans of all disabilities. I'd say maybe 5 to 10 at the most from each league: NBA, NHL, Major League Soccer, NFL as well. I thought about giving you one of the 10 teams maybe from each league, but then that would lead to speculation, I suppose, of does someone's favorite team do a great job? And I know what teams do a great job and what teams don't, because I have studied what they do, what they have on the internet, the responses that they've given back to me when I've emailed and I've called front office members, how willing they have been to listen or to possibly consider changing. The hardest part is that fans in this country really don't get upset about if there isn't someone working on a team staff who can do sign language, or if they don't have noise canceling headphones for someone who has autism or who has trouble dealing with noise at a game. Fans could do so much more, because when I tell a team, if they aren't really having people ask for those things, teams just don't really see why they should have to do it. So I know there were many people in this country and across the world who were really bothered whenever sports shut down for the 4-month period from March onwards till the start of August or shortly before. But that didn't really bother me. And at one point in my life, it actually would have bothered me. But after realizing how much a large percentage of the teams in this country really don't want to do things for all disabilities, they will typically pick a couple of disabilities and they will do everything for those disabilities. Sometimes it's autism, sometimes it's someone who's blind, it just depends. But there's 8, 9, 10 disabilities that a team should do everything for, and leagues and teams tend to pick 1 or 2 disabilities, and they get such great media coverage and people tell them what a great job they're doing for 1 to 2 groups of people, but they're not accommodating all groups of people who have all disabilities. And that's why I'm really not as much of a sports fan as I once was. I'm not sure if it's ever going to come back to me being a sports fan, but it does make it easier to speak to teams and to talk about what they need to do, because I can break it down not as a fan of their team, but as someone who wants to make the experience at the stadium as great as it can be for people of all disabilities. And then with the Beautiful Lives Project, we really have great programs throughout the country. Every time that we have an event, make sure that it's accessible for fans of all disabilities, whether it's playing on the court or the field. Not necessarily a challenge, but something we could always use more of is more coaches of sports at any level, high school, college, or professional sports, being willing to give fans of all disabilities the opportunity to play on the court or the field with their team for an hour before or after a team practice. So I'm constantly emailing people, leaving them voicemails, messaging them on Twitter. So if you know any coaches who might want to host an event, just have them contact me at bryce@beautifullives.org, or they can contact one of our staff members through our website, beautifullives.org, as we have a plethora of Beautiful Lives Project chapters throughout the country.
Thank you for that. I know that some of the baseball games after the game you get to run the bases, but I have no idea how they accommodate someone with a disability to try to do that too. Also, Eli, Bryce, I'll go to Eli next, is that I think that what happens is that the leagues are sponsoring big, broad topics. So Crucial Catch by the NFL, Stand Up for Cancer, wearing a pink shirt or having a pink bat for breast cancer. But I think, what you guys are all saying, and I'm hearing loud and clear, is that this has to be taken down to a different level. And it has to be made important so that sport can be accessible to all. And it's your message is quite important, and the fact that you actually got Braille on the jersey in Baltimore is one, heroic, and that other teams didn't follow. Still more work to be done. Eli, I'd like you to take us down deeper into what your project is, but also what you said about participating in the Paralympic Games. If you could actually elaborate on how they how that was actually taken, because now what I understand is after the Olympic Games, a week later, the Paralympic Games happen. And so they must be doing something, and there's some forward progress, but I'm sure there's lots more to go. So if you could take us through that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm happy to address kind of some of the more macro aspects, and then also just in terms of overall, I mean, just on the Olympic and Paralympic side, it's been particularly in the last couple of years, there's been some really good progress, although there's still a long way to go. In the United States, two of the major steps that were done in the last year was the equal pay for medals. So now Olympians and Paralympians receive the equal earnings for gold medal and bronze, which is a big step. Before it was about 1/3 differential. So when you think about the equal pay conversation, that there has been a little bit of equity in that regard. The other thing that's happening in the United States has been the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee. So now the name change of the whole organization. So it brings a little bit more awareness and understanding to the fact that this is an organization for and with and by Olympians and Paralympians. At the international level, it's always important to realize, like, there's the Paralympics, there's Special Olympics, and there's also the Deaf Olympics. There's sort of those three main buckets. And, our work has really focused a lot on the Olympic space. But it's actually been interesting because if you look at the Olympic Charter, Principle 6 addresses issues of non-discrimination, diversity, and inclusion, but disability is not explicitly articulated. And so we've actually been working with different international groups to actually look at that, particularly as it relates to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and how if the IOC is a member in standing with the United Nations, then they need to be more fully addressing disability, both athletes that have disabilities, both visible and invisible, that are on the Olympic side, but also with respect to the status of Paralympics, Special Olympics, and Deaf Olympics too. So that's those kind of important questions at the international level of diversity and inclusion. And I mean, part of this in a bigger perspective has to do with kind of the conversations that we're having now, where race in society, gender in society. These are topics of racism and sexism that we're gaining more comfort with, that we're more aware of the nuances and how to have these conversations and how to negotiate and how to bring forward and how to look at equity, even if it's not there yet and there's a lot of work to be done. At least it's a more public discourse. For disability, for ableism, this is a conversation that is not as comfortable. It's not as spoken about. It's not as articulated about kind of the system of the society that we're living in, and how in many ways, disability and ableism are entrenched. And in many ways, disability becomes sort of the fear factor and the oxymoron of sport. And so how do we get people to think about disability from more of a proactive standpoint, to get folks to think about inclusive design and universal design, and to really think about how all the innovations and creativity and all that can really come from being inclusive, not only on the playing field, but in terms of the boardrooms, in terms of the fans, in terms of the concierge, all the different stakeholders that are involved in building a sport, whether that's at the professional level, collegiate, Olympic, and so forth. So I think that part of it, we've worked with all the leagues, with all the Olympic, we're one of the big kind of donut holes, as we talk about, is the collegiate and high school level. There's definitely, we worked on the 2013 guidance to the Rehabilitation Act that helped to clarify that opportunities for students with disabilities need to be provided both in adaptive settings and also in inclusive settings. And so part of it is just to sort of be aware, and for all stakeholders to see that disability is not necessarily something we need to be afraid of, but it's really something that can be sort of a more culture building. There's their pride aspect. There's so part of it is, how do we get there? How do we build leaders, and more and more people can be in positions of articulating, and part of it is that there aren't that many Bryce and Joanna and other. I mean, there's a small subset of folks that are able to actually sit with sports stakeholders and actually have these conversations in a comprehensive way, and also to break it down. And I guess one of the things I'll just sort of touch on briefly, it has to do, I think, with many things, but one of them is sort of the perpetuation of in the media, of the storytelling, of the narrative of disability. And so disability, and this is somewhat more of a cultural aspect, but disability becomes sort of more of that pity, you kind of feeling bad. And I guess one thing to say is that, sport is about inspiration. I mean, there's so much about inspiration in sport overall, for men, for women, for everybody. So there's an important component of inspiration about being inspired in sport. And that's really important. Like, we want to have that inspiration for people with disabilities. It's just sometimes when that inspiration becomes sort of more of the feel good, or it kind of has a paternalistic approach rather than recognizing the athletic side. So I think that sometimes when the stories and the media picks up on are these stories of pity and feel, the what we kind of sometimes call the mascot stories, or the sort of the token story. And so part of, I think, what the challenge and work we've done with ESPN and Nike, Nike has just come out with the Fly Ease shoe. The Fly Ease is a great example of universal design, of really realizing that anybody can wear a cool shoe that's designed. Initially it was designed for Matthew Walzer, a young guy with cerebral palsy, but that shoe's taken off to be for everybody. So I think there's these examples now, and a slow progression, but I just wanted to share more of that kind of macro aspect, and not to be afraid to have these conversations, because I think that's the first step, is to get the leagues and teams and organizations in the way that they're addressing race and gender to be able to engage at the disability level.
Thank you for that. It sounds like there's some awareness, or some good awareness out there. Here in the U.S., I know that with American with Disabilities Act, I mean, they have handicap parking spaces, but I think there's just so much more they can do. In this next round, I'd like you all to think about where is the call to action? Where are you focused? Where do we need to move the needle forward? Joanna, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Yes, kind of linking on from what Eli was talking about with education and awareness there, with the topic of the moment with COVID-19. So pre-COVID-19 in Europe, it was estimated that 50% of disabled people had never attended a live public or sporting event, and 50% a third had never traveled to an away game because of various barriers that sports were presenting to them. But at the same time, pre-COVID-19, it was estimated that 40% of the population benefit from good access at any given time. So that could be parents with young children and buggies. It could be someone who doesn't speak the local language and relies on international symbols and signage, or it could be someone with a temporary injury like a broken leg. But now with COVID-19, I'd say that figure is 100% of the population, because right now we're all benefiting from wide circulation pathways, from automated tap systems, and also from, in terms of the workplace, which Bryce and Eli were touching on before as well, around making sure that disabled people have the same right to work as anyone else. We're all benefiting from being able to work from home, from flexible working policies if we're trying to homeschool children whilst also trying to work. And these are all things that disabled people have been asking for a long time. And so I think, this is a real opportunity now, as we're trying to look at sport with a new perspective, trying to future-proof for them. There'll be another pandemic at some point, and trying to use this time to see how we can perhaps, learn from the mistakes we've made in the past and how we can move forward together. So yeah, I really hope that this is a time where we can start to consult disability NGOs, experts and stakeholders to understand, okay, what were the barriers that there were before? What are the potential barriers we're already starting to create in our desperate desire to return to stadia? And how can we move forward to ensure that disabled people are empowered through this, and that we create a more inclusive society that benefits everyone?
The timing, and very powerful, Joanna. That is, the timing's now, right? Before we return back to stadiums safely, I know that a few fans here in the U.S. for American NFL football, they allow a few stands in as long as they're separated. But now is a perfect time to be able to make change and to accommodate the future. So I thank you for that. Bryce, where do you see things going? As what's the call to action? If according to what you need to do and where things need to go.
It's important for each team to have someone on their staff who works with fans of all disabilities. Maybe they have like an officer role for that, or an assistant role, vice president, something such as that nature. But not every team has that person on their staff in this country and in the various sports, MLB, NHL, NFL, Major League Soccer, because the leagues do not say the teams have to have that. So what England has with their football over there, soccer as it might be called in this country, every team having that type of a role, if every team had to have that type of a role in this country, things would get done a lot faster. But that comes back to convincing the important people at the league level, Adam Silver, Rob Manfred, various people such as that, and the other leagues, the importance of setting league-wide standards. Hopefully that will happen sooner rather than later. If not, we'll just wait till a new commissioner comes in for each of the leagues, which happens every 20 to 30 years. But I would like to see change happening faster than every 20 to 30 years. So hopefully fans can start getting upset and more frustrated about the things that they haven't had at games in the past, and we'll start telling that to their favorite teams or to the leagues, because so often fans are just happy to go watch their favorite team play, and they don't really feel like they can challenge their team for not having things in Braille, noise canceling headphones, or someone on the staff who can translate sign language. So it never really gets done. So some of it comes down to the fans.
So I think that from a top down, you're looking at talking to the heads of the leagues and the players associations and the owners and decision makers. But on the grassroots, you're actually asking for us as fans to actually make it a point to actually mention that to our teams and our feedback and our support and ask them. So I think it needs to work both ways. Would you agree?
Yes, I mean, I've already tried talking to the leaders of the teams. I haven't got very far with a large portion of the teams who don't really have the best programs for fans of all disabilities. So maybe if they start hearing things from fans or from various groups in the cities across the country, things might get done, because I keep emailing and calling the same people year after year. They actually know me so well that when they ask about my family or how Beautiful Lives Project is going, because they have heard from me that much, or basically when I email them, they tell me, no, we still don't want to improve this, but here's all the things we've done for these two groups of fans who have disabilities. Then I email back and say, well, I'm happy you've done those things for those two groups. How about these other 3 or 4 groups that I asked you about last year? And no real response back on that.
I don't want to wait 20 or 30 years, Bryce. I don't think anyone in this session wants to wait 20 or 30 years. So, Eli, what's the calls to action? What are we telling people? Where do we activate?
Excellent. No, I think I would definitely echo what Joanna and Bryce have said for sure. I think they've really good points. I mean, I guess just some other things to add to the conversation. It's really interesting to see what's happening in fashion and also the entertainment world. There's big initiatives going on in terms of disability inclusion in fashion and also entertainment, with the Oscars and also with different fashion leaders. There's an initiative called Valuable 500 at Davos World Economic Forum that's really looking at the buying power and the economic impact of disability. And so I think those elements need to be brought even more into the sport world, so that there can be these kind of unifying strategic initiatives by the sports entities to embrace disability. I think that part of what we're seeing is sometimes the disability community gets a little bit fractionalized and they speak from several different voices and different perspectives, rather than having kind of a unified front of stakeholders coming together and really being a solid voice. We see that more with race and gender. There's clearly diversity amongst all, but from a standpoint of communicating clearly, I think that's been a strength that we're seeing and can learn from other movements. And so I think in many ways, the call to action is how do we, have a strategic, unifying kind of strategy? How do we learn from others? And also, again, I would just echo the, just getting people in position. So, we've done a lot of work, colleagues Ted and Mary, and we've kind of looked at kind of organizational change and critical change what makes things tip and what makes things move, and how do we move along a continuum from exclusion to valuing inclusion. And a big role, and both Joanna and Bryce have touched on it, is like, it has to do with relationships, it has to do with people. And so the people that are in those positions to actually have an impact. And so, having in each team, in each NGB, at each entity of sport at a high school level, college, that there needs to be one or more, people that are really focused, are really responsible for engaging, and not from a compliance standpoint and not from a preventative standpoint, but more of a proactive standpoint. And really that, we have the ADA, you mentioned the ADA, and that's the baseline, but how do we keep, so there's a number of these call to actions, and it's really nice to hear that we've all kind of echoed each other.
Well, awareness and education is really important. So take me through what's next. Paint for me heading into Joanna, heading into FIFA, World Cup, and then Eli, you can speak to maybe the Olympics in Japan. But take me into your organization's future for the next couple of years, but also then take me into what we'd love to see, a little further down the road, and not wait 30 years for really important action to take place.
So in terms of Cafe, what we've got coming up, Howard, you actually mentioned this a little bit before we started this session, but we're just about to launch a report on non-visible disabilities and the barriers that they face in attending live matches. So we've released some statistics from this research that we've been doing this year, which has come out on our website over the past week, some snippets. But there'll be a full report coming out soon, which is going to lead to a lot more action around disability inclusion and etiquette training for stewards, and understanding more about terminology, and trying to make sure that we're communicating to the diverse range of differently disabled people. The other thing that we're looking to launch is a disability abuse reporting toolkit. I don't know about in the US, but in Europe, there's nothing that exists at the moment. And there's also a real lack of education in terms of what disability abuse means, whether it be in the stands or online. So we're going to try and bring that out to raise awareness around the prevalence of this, and to try and find ways to prevent it, and equip non-disabled people and disabled people to call out when disability abuse does occur. We're obviously working on the Euros, really hoping they go ahead with spectators in the summer in 2021. And then we're also working with FIFA as well around their World Cups, and trying to support their member associations with more educational toolkits. So those are the main things we're looking at in terms of what Cafe's up to. And I don't know if you want to go to the others before we talk about the ideal of what we want to see in disability.
No, you can share the ideals.
Okay.
The ideals.
Ideally, and this is an area that Cafe is going to start trying to work on as well, we want to see more disabled people at decision-making levels. Personally, I'm a firm believer that we're going to see progress in disability inclusion through regulations and through liaising with disabled stakeholders, etc. But that growth is going to accelerate so much more if we see more disabled people at decision-making levels. And I don't mean appointing disabled people automatically into roles that are linked to accessibility, but ensuring that disabled people have the right to access whatever career they want to within sports, and then seeing them at decision-making levels, because it's proven there's so much research done into diverse leadership and the benefits that brings. So that's what I really want to see in sports.
Well, I have to tell you that it has taken a long time, but we are now seeing, women as coaches in professional men's sports and basketball, and in men's football, the U.S. version of football. And there's small but much more progress, and there's same thing in racially hiring coaches and giving people that opportunity. So I think that people with disabilities certainly deserve that same opportunity. Bryce, take us through what you're doing in the in real immediate future. I know you're continuing on with getting the word out about beautiful lives, and then what your ideals are, not in 20 to 30 years, but hopefully sooner.
With the Beautiful Lives Project at the moment, I've been giving lots of Zoom speeches to teams. So I've been suffering through being on video and praying that I'm looking at the camera for the entire hour for a long few months now. So I've been doing a lot of that, and speeches to Rotary clubs about getting more Beautiful Lives Project chapter presidents throughout the country, and getting more coaches excited to do programs where people of all disabilities can play on the court or the field with their teams. So hopefully we can get some coaches and some more people interested in supporting what the Beautiful Lives Project does out of this session, or through sharing it with your friends, or our website, beautifullives.org. We'd love to have people help us through donating and fundraising, and because we want to make the dreams of people of all disabilities come true. Once it's safe to have programs again on courts and fields, and in our other categories of art, cheerleading, dance, ballet, and nature, I have many programs lined up throughout the entire country. So maybe someone can go watch one, depending where you live in the country. Someone could contact me and let me know that if they want to do that. So our website again is beautifullives.org. For what I'd like to see with sport in the future, there has to be standards, whether that's laws or fans calling leagues and teams, but laws would probably be the best way to go. And I know that takes time, but it's really frustrating not really enjoying sports anymore. And I've felt that way for the past 2 or 3 years. I kind of miss enjoying sports, but I have lots of time in my life now, so it doesn't really bother me if I miss a game or 2 or 3, and it was something that really had bothered me in the past. So getting standards set as quickly as possible, whether that comes through laws, through Congress, or through statewide laws for what teams have to do for fans of all disabilities, which can be harder as politics. People who are in politics all have their own issues and their own things they want to try to share, even though they are supposed to be supporting the people who they represent in their various states. So maybe fans speaking to the leagues or their favorite teams about things they don't have, and actually boycotting games, or really sharing how much these things bother them, because I hear from fans all the time what they're bothered by with their team or what their team doesn't do, but they don't really feel like they can express that to the staff of their favorite team.
Thank you. Eli, what's on your horizons, and what's the ideals coming forth?
Yeah, I know you mentioned the Olympics, coming up, and that's obviously a big from our work at the intersection of research, education, advocacy, and working with globally stakeholders. I mean, it's really interesting with Tokyo 2021, because of the emphasis in Japan around these notions of inclusion and universal design. I mean, there's some real possibilities that Tokyo could really help to further these conversations. So we're really, engaged in a variety of ways of looking at whether that's not only at the player level, but also overall administrative and kind of how it all comes together. I mean, I think there's still aspects of overall, as I mentioned earlier, about how the IOC really coordinates and works together around Olympics and Paralympics, Special Olympics and Deaf Olympics. So that's always something that we're really keen on, is having that more holistic approach. Additionally, not only at the Olympic Games level, but also in terms of international sport federations. So a lot of this drills down to what is each sport doing. And so having this kind of overall approach, and a lot of the great examples, for example, of CAFE and the other institutes around the world that are looking at inclusion, and particularly with the framework of the United Nations Convention, it offers a lot. And also some of the work being done by UNESCO and others, it kind of helps make the case. So that's in one level. The second area that 3 areas, the second area is at the scholastic level, and of course in the United States, so at the NCAA level, and also at the high school level, K through 12. So a lot of work still to envision that and to engage and create really practical solutions for doing individual and also team sport. And part of the vision is also that the mixed sports, so inclusive of people with and without disabilities. So sports like sitting volleyball or goalball or other sports that can really be for people with and without disabilities, especially from a critical mass standpoint of engaging more and more people. And then the third area is particularly this opportunity of convening the leagues and teams around disability. I mean, there's been many sessions around gender and race. And so we're now working with some of the stakeholders in the commissioner's office and so forth to kind of, and now maybe in a virtual space, and connecting that again back to these international conventions and so forth, and also the ADA in its 30th anniversary. But to really look at furthering those conversations and really having it being an important pillar within the professional sport arena. So those are some, and then of course back to Olympics. We have the Olympics coming in at 2020 World Cup and then Olympics. So these are important events. And so again, back to what everyone's been saying, the time is now.
I appreciate that. So we're going to be heading very shortly into a lunchtime speaking, and I guess we're very honored to have former Commissioner Paul Tagliabue speaking at lunchtime as our keynote. So hopefully, I'm not sure he's taking questions or not, but in our wrap up here, is it the need funding? Is it awareness? Is it hiring, or is it all of the above? So I'd like to just go around and get a final word from all of you as to how we keep pushing forward.
I'll go first if I may.
Yes, Joanna.
I think obviously all of the above, but I think we all have to start with awareness, because unless we truly understand the daily barriers that exist, the daily discrimination that disabled people face, then we're not really going to understand the solutions, the impact that it has, and the solutions that we need to find. So I think the first real thing is awareness and true understanding of what disability discrimination is and how we can avoid it and how we can truly empower disabled people. Because from there, we'll come up with decent solutions that will genuinely benefit people in a sustainable and meaningful way.
Thank you, Bryce.
Teams and leagues have the funding. It's just choosing how they spend their funding. So making them aware of the importance of both hiring people of all disabilities for high-level roles in their team, and also through doing things within the stadium in their cities, they can really create more of a broader base for their product if they're targeting people of all disabilities and they're also giving them the same roles to work in their front office as someone who does not have any disability.
Yeah, I think Eli mentioned that the buying power of the disabled people, buying memorabilia, shirts, sports, hats, caps is enormous, and I think it's probably understated. So, Eli, over to you here for.
Yeah, no, I think that it's really important, and I think just this conversation we've had about the power of even an individual, that can really be that user expert or even a collective. So I think having people involved in staff related positions that can have that impact, at the same time putting in policies in place, because if it's in the books, if it's there, then that has a big effect. So I think a combination of the policies being in place and that commitment and that prioritization, but also having, again, back to the people power, because if you don't have people there, then there's no infrastructure to make it work. And so by designating people, it really helps to be transformative.
I think that you may or may not have known each other, but wherever you can team up is helpful. Joanna, you don't have a counterpart organization here in the U.S., or do you?
No.
I see a real need.
Yeah, there's a big gap.
You got to focus where you are, but boy, oh boy, we really need that as well. And Bryce, just getting more chapters out there, it allows you to hit more local areas as well. And that research that your group's doing, is so vital. So I just keep going. You are really, listen, we have to get the word out. You have to educate. You guys are doing your part, and we need to continue the effort because sport can be so great in many, many ways, but we actually have to fix where it's broken, and it's still broken. And I think we all agree to that. And I just want to tell you, it's been a real privilege to meet you and hear you. And I think that I just think it's really great work that you're doing. And then I know that when Sports Philanthropy gets this finished, we'll be able to send this out to our networks and get people at least aware of this session. And you all spoke so beautifully and passionately, and I've just felt privileged to spend some time with you today and help get this conversation going and continuing and out there to the masses. So I want to thank you all, and we'll see you at the lunchtime speaking session.
Thank you too. And yeah, we're going to work on some kind of a call to action, or we've talked before about trying to pull something that can be a document or a resource. So, yeah.
It's beautiful. Teamwork will get us through, because teams score touchdowns, right? And but we're a little collaboration always helps. I wish you just so much good work and keep going and we will get there. We'll make incremental jumps and go around the hurdles and roadblocks and keep climbing the mountain. So again, thank you. It's been my pleasure. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to the audience, and great moderating skills, Howard. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you all. We'll see you at the lunchtime session.
Yeah,
Thank
you.
you.
Soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.